Ever wondered what happens when a lazy, power-hungry manager tries to force a sick employee to work and ends up paying for it big time? Well, I turned his threat into a 2-week paid vacation and a lesson he'll never forget. Stick around, because this revenge is too satisfying to miss.
My name's Ryan Carter, and back when I was about 22, I worked at a big grocery store chain in my hometown in Ohio. Now, before I get into this, I should tell you, I wasn't exactly a slacker. I was that kid who'd show up 15 minutes early just to grab a coffee and be ready to clock in the second my shift started. I wasn't trying to be teacher's pet or anything. I just needed that paycheck and knew not to mess it up. Back then, I didn't have any big dreams yet. I wasn't in college, wasn't in a band, didn't have any $1,000,000 startup ideas. I just wanted to make rent on my tiny studio apartment, keep my old Honda Civic running, and maybe take my girlfriend out for pizza on Friday nights if I was feeling fancy. So to me, showing up to work on time and not calling in sick unless I was basically dying was just common sense. Anyway, the grocery store was called Fresh Mart, one of those places that tries to act all organic and friendly, but treats its employees like disposable napkins. And the guy in charge of the place was a walking cliché of a bad boss. Let's call him Stan Rogers. Stan had this fake grin that could peel paint off the walls. He'd call everyone buddy, but wouldn't remember your name unless you were one of his manager pals. Stan also had this rule, unwritten but ironclad. If you called in sick, you were basically calling yourself a liar. According to Stan, nobody under 40 ever got sick for real. And God forbid you had the nerve to say you had the flu or food poisoning. He'd roll his eyes so far back you swear he was going to fall over. So, it was the winter of 2015, right in the middle of flu season. I'd gone 9 months without missing a single shift. Not one. I even came in once with a sprained wrist because I didn't want to get on Stan's radar. But this time, my body wasn't giving me a choice. I woke up around midnight with chills so bad my teeth were chattering like castanets. My cheap space heater was blasting, but I was freezing 1 minute and dripping sweat the next. I stumbled to the bathroom and, well, let's just say my stomach was doing backflips in both directions. It was a nightmare. Somewhere around 3 a.m., I remember sitting on the toilet with my forehead resting in the bathroom sink. I must have passed out there because the next thing I knew, my phone alarm was buzzing. It was 7:30 a.m. I was supposed to clock in at noon for a double shift. I knew there was no way I could stand behind a register for 10 hours, pretending to smile at customers while trying not to puke on their groceries. So, I grabbed my phone with shaking hands and called Stan. I don't think I'll ever forget that call. Me. Hey Stan, sorry to bother you this early, but I can't come in today. I've been throwing up all night. I'm burning up. I think I've got the flu or food poisoning or something. Stan. Ryan, don't start this crap with me. You're young. If you really had the flu, you wouldn't even be able to call me right now. You'd be knocked out cold. Me. Stan, I literally passed out in the bathroom. I can't even keep water down. Stan. Either get in here or bring me a doctor's note or don't bother coming back at all. Your choice, buddy. He hung up on me. Just like that. Now, anyone who's ever worked a low-wage job in the States knows how this goes. Technically, by law, you don't need a doctor's note for 1 day off. But Stan knew people couldn't risk losing their jobs over a sick day. And I was terrified. It was still the tail end of the recession. Jobs were hard to get. I didn't have savings. Missing rent wasn't an option. So, like a complete idiot, I dragged myself out of bed. It took me 20 minutes just to get dressed because every time I bent over to pull on my socks, I thought I'd puke again. I wrapped myself in my thickest coat and stumbled out into the Ohio winter.
My local clinic was about a 20-minute walk away. Every step felt like I was trekking through a snowstorm barefoot. I kept having to sit down on someone's front porch steps to catch my breath. I probably looked like a drunk raccoon. When I finally got to the clinic, the waiting room was packed with coughing kids and exhausted parents. I checked in and collapsed into a plastic chair. An old lady next to me took one look at me and actually slid her chair further away. Can't blame her. I was a mess. After an hour or so, I got called back. The nurse took my temperature and made this disapproving tisk sound. I had a fever of 102. The doctor, Dr. Patel, came in looking like she just had the world's worst morning already. She asked why I'd come in for flu symptoms when I could just rest at home and drink fluids. When I explained about Stan and how he'd threatened to fire me if I didn't show up with a note, she went from annoyed to absolutely livid, though thankfully not at me. Dr. Patel leaned back in her chair and crossed her arms. So let me get this straight, Ryan. You dragged yourself here, in this condition, because your manager threatened to fire you for legally staying home sick? I nodded weakly. She muttered something in Hindi I didn't catch, but I'm pretty sure it was not a compliment. Then she clicked away at her computer for a second, printed something out, and signed it with a dramatic flourish. She handed me the paper. Give this to your manager, and for the record, stay home. If you come back here, I'm calling the health department on him. I glanced at the note and almost burst out laughing, despite how miserable I felt. It didn't just say I was sick, it basically called out Stan for being a bully, and said, due to his reckless demand, I was now signed off work for 2 full weeks instead of just 2 days. Paid! I shuffled out of there feeling like I just won the lottery and the flu at the same time. And now, here's where the real fun begins. Holding that note in my shaky hands felt like carrying a golden ticket straight out of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, except instead of chocolate, it promised me 2 glorious weeks of lying in bed, watching Netflix and sipping ginger ale, all on Stan's dime. Now, I knew I probably should have just crawled back home and emailed the note in. But a petty part of me, the part that had to mop puke in the bathroom more than once because Stan was too busy to call maintenance, wanted to hand that note to him face to face. I wanted him to see exactly what he'd forced me to do. So, despite being so lightheaded I was seeing double, I trudged back through the icy streets to Fresh Mart. I probably should have called an Uber, but I was broke and didn't want to waste the last $12 in my checking account when payday was still 4 days away. When I pushed through the sliding glass doors, the warm blast of stale grocery store air almost knocked me over. I must have looked like a zombie because my coworker, Jesse Taylor, who was manning the customer service counter, did a double take. Ryan? Dude, you look awful. What are you doing here? I half whispered, half croaked, Stan said I had to bring a doctor's note or get fired. Jesse's eyes got huge. Are you serious? Man, that guy's going to get sued one day. Come on, I'll walk you down to the office. I followed her past the bread aisle and down the dingy back hallway that smelled like cardboard and stale coffee. She knocked once on Stan's door, then pushed it open without waiting for an answer. Inside, Stan was leaning back in his cheap swivel chair, scrolling through his phone like a teenager. When he saw me, he sat up so fast he nearly knocked over his mug of cold coffee. Ryan, I told you to get a note, not drag your sick butt in here. What the hell is wrong with you? He looked at Jessie like this was somehow her fault. I didn't say a word. I just walked up to his cluttered desk, slapped the note down right in front of him, and stepped back. Jessie crossed her arms and glared at him for good measure. Stan squinted at the paper. As he read, his face turned a color that can best be described as overripe tomato. What's this? He sputtered. 2 weeks? 2 damn weeks? No, this is not what I asked for. I just needed a quick note for today. I croaked out. Doc said you shouldn't have made me come in. Now I'm worse. She signed me off. Says it's the law. Stan stammered. Well, I didn't mean I wasn't serious about firing you. That was just, manager talk. Jessie cut in before I could even open my mouth. Stan, I heard you on speaker. You threatened to fire him if he didn't bring a note. He did exactly what you said. Deal with it. Stan opened and closed his mouth like a goldfish. I thought for a second he might blow a gasket right then and there. But then he saw the look on Jessie's face, and probably remembered she was good friends with our union rep. He forced a smile so stiff it looked painful. Well, all right then. Ryan, you go home and, get better. We'll figure it out. Jessie raised an eyebrow. I'll walk him to my car and drive him home. He shouldn't even be here, Stan, and I'm calling Rick from the union when I get back. Stan looked like he wanted to argue, but instead he just nodded and pretended to shuffle some papers like he was busy. Jessie grabbed my arm and steered me out of there before he could change his mind. As soon as we hit the parking lot, I felt a wave of dizziness. Jessie had to half carry me to her beat-up Corolla. She cranked the heat and even stopped at a drive-thru on the way to my apartment to get me a big cup of ginger ale. When we pulled up outside my apartment, she turned off the engine and looked at me with this mix of pity and amusement. Stan's gonna have to work doubles to cover you. He's gonna hate every second of it. I managed a weak grin. Serves him right. She laughed and handed me my bag. Call me if you need anything, okay? Don't die in there alone. I promised I'd text her if I needed groceries. Then I crawled up my stairs, collapsed on my bed, still wearing my coat, and passed out for what felt like a year. Over the next couple of days, I actually did feel pretty rough. Fever, chills, the whole 9 yards. But by day 4, I was already feeling more human. And that's when the sweet taste of revenge really started to kick in. See, Fresh Mart's staffing was always tight. We had just enough people to cover shifts if nobody called in sick or had an emergency. Now, with me out for 2 weeks, they were short a cashier during the holiday rush. And guess who had to cover most of my shifts? Yep, Stan.
Jesse and a few other coworkers kept me in the loop via text. Apparently, Stan tried to bully a couple part-timers into picking up extra hours, but nobody wanted to do double shifts for minimum wage, not when they knew Stan would take credit for their overtime. So Stan had to clock in himself to bag groceries, mop floors, and run the register. He hadn't done any real grunt work in years, and by all accounts, he was terrible at it. Customers complained left and right. A few even posted bad Yelp reviews mentioning the rude older guy at checkout. Meanwhile, I spent my days binging old sitcoms, napping whenever I felt like it, and ordering delivery I technically shouldn't have been able to afford. But hey, I was still getting my paycheck. Paid sick leave, courtesy of Fresh Mart's HR policy that Stan couldn't override no matter how mad he was. By the time day 7 rolled around, I was feeling good enough to do more than just shuffle between my bed and the couch. So I did what any bored 20-something with a bone to pick would do. I checked my work group chat and cut up on all the gossip. Turns out, Stan's meltdown had become legendary. Jesse and my buddy Luis Ramirez, who worked nights stocking shelves, filled me in on all the juicy details. Apparently, on my second day out, Stan tried to call in his nephew Chad, a college kid who barely knew how to run the register, to cover my shift. Chad rang up a lady's groceries twice and caused a meltdown at aisle 3. By the time Stan came over to fix it, 3 more customers had stormed off without buying anything. Luis texted me, "Bro, I wish you were here to see it. Stan was sweating through his shirt and trying to apologize while bagging canned peas. Dude nearly cried." I laughed so hard I nearly spilled soup on my comforter. For once, it felt like karma didn't need an invitation. To make it even better, our union rep Rick Dalton, a burly ex-trucker who didn't take crap from anybody, had gotten wind of the whole fiasco. Rick didn't waste time. He scheduled a meeting with Stan and the district manager Carla Simmons to talk about proper sick leave protocols. When Jessie told me about the meeting, she said Stan looked like a dog who knew he'd peed on the carpet but hoped no one noticed. Carla was newish and trying to clean up Fresh Mart's reputation, so she wasn't too happy to find out a manager was threatening hourly workers during flu season. I couldn't stop picturing Stan nodding meekly while Carla lectured him about labor laws and the union contract he probably never bothered to read. It was poetic justice at its finest. While all this was unfolding, I spent my days catching up on all the stuff I never had time for because of work. I finally organized my tiny kitchen pantry, found 3 cans of expired beans back there. I sorted my laundry pile, which was starting to look like a fabric version of Mount Everest. But the best part, the weather was unseasonably warm for March. So when I wasn't too tired, I'd sit out on my little balcony with a hoodie and a cup of tea, watching my neighbors walk their dogs and soaking up the sunshine. Jessie swung by twice with soup and fresh bread. Louis dropped off a 6-pack of ginger ale and a frozen pizza. Even my landlord, Mr. Patel, asked if I needed help picking up my mail. It felt weirdly nice to see people care after years of busting my butt for a boss who couldn't even believe I might get the flu. On day 10, Jessie called me while I was watching reruns of The Office. "Ryan, you won't believe this. Stan tried to write you up for failing to follow call-out protocol."
I barked out a laugh. What? I literally did exactly what he demanded. "I know," she said. "Rick shut him down so fast, he reminded Stan that you're allowed to self-certify for 5 days, and that he basically forced you to break that rule by threatening your job." Carla sided with Rick. "Now Stan's on a final written warning. If he pulls this crap again, he's out." I felt a satisfaction deeper than any overtime paycheck could ever buy. I didn't even have to lift a finger. The truth just tripped Stan up like a rake wading in tall grass. By the time my official return to work date rolled around, I was more than ready to go back. Partly because my tiny apartment felt like a jail cell by day 13, but mostly because I couldn't wait to see Stan's face when I walked in, healthy and rested. On my first morning back, I made sure to get there 10 minutes early.
an old habit that Stan had always taken for granted. As soon as I clocked in, Jessie gave me a conspiratorial grin and handed me a fresh cup of coffee from the nice cafe down the street. "On the house," she said. "Welcome back, hero." Lewis high-fived me so hard he almost made me spill it. Then Stan came skulking over. He looked like he hadn't had a good night's sleep since I left. His shirt was untucked, and I swear he had a coffee stain on his tie. "Ryan," he said, voice forced into something that vaguely resembled polite. "Glad you're feeling better. Let's put this all behind us and move on, okay?" I smiled like butter wouldn't melt in my mouth. "Absolutely, Stan. Just doing my best to follow store policy, you know?" He flinched a little, but managed a stiff nod. Then he scuttled off to the office, probably to hide for the rest of the shift, while I jumped back behind my old register. Over the next few days, word got around that Stan was on thin ice with Carla and Rick. He tried to act tough with a few new hires, but they knew the union rep was watching. Jessie said he was more of a ghost manager than ever, hiding behind paperwork and pretending to be busy with regional reports, whatever that meant. Meanwhile, I got a weird kind of respect for my coworkers. Even the older cashiers who usually kept to themselves gave me nods and quiet thumbs up. It felt good to know I hadn't just stood up for myself, but for everyone else who'd ever been too scared to push back. And the icing on the cake? A couple of weeks later, Carla posted a new policy memo on the break room board in big, bold letters. "Reminder, employees may self-certify sick leave for up to 5 days per occurrence per company policy and state law. No manager may override this." Underneath, in even bigger letters, "Any violation of this policy may result in disciplinary action." Jessie snapped a picture of it and texted me, "Congrats, hero. You got your own rule." Life at Freshmart got a lot calmer after that memo went up. Suddenly, Stan wasn't stomping around barking orders like a discount drill sergeant. He tried to be on his best behavior, probably hoping Carla would forget he'd nearly cost the store a lawsuit.
Of course, we all knew Stan would never truly change. He was still lazy when it came to real work, always in a meeting if there were carts to collect or pallets to unload, but he didn't mess with sick leave again, not after the union made an example out of him. I went back to clocking in early, working hard and covering shifts when I could, not because I owed Stan anything, but because I liked my coworkers. Jessie, Lewis, and I had always run a tight ship up front, and with Stan out of our hair, it actually felt good to keep things running smooth. A few weeks after I came back, Carla did a surprise store walkthrough. She stopped by my lane while I was ringing up an old lady's mountain of cat food. "You must be Ryan," she said, smiling like a principal who'd heard a kid pulled an epic prank but couldn't officially say she approved. "That's me," I said, trying not to sound too smug while scanning Fancy Feast cans. "I heard you helped us tighten up some important policy around here," she said, lowering her voice just enough that the customer couldn't hear. I shrugged. "Just did what Stan asked, sort of." Carla laughed. "Well, corporate compliance is thrilled, and the union rep says you handled it better than most would have, so thank you." She patted me on the shoulder and moved along, complimenting Jessie on the neat front-end displays as she went. When the lady with the cat food shuffled away with her receipt, Jessie popped over and nudged me with her elbow. "Look at you, teacher's pet," she teased. "Yeah, well, next time maybe I'll get the flu again right before inventory week." Outside of work, my life started to settle into something that actually felt sustainable for once. That little 2-week forced break had shown me just how close to burnout I'd been. Before all this, I'd been scraping by, working every shift offered, covering for coworkers who bailed last minute, pulling doubles during the holidays without a second thought. Stan loved workers like me, dependable to a fault, afraid to say no. But during those 2 weeks, when I finally had time to breathe, I realized the world didn't end if I took care of myself first. The store didn't implode. It just forced Stan to do his actual job for once. So I made a promise to myself. Never again would I let some incompetent manager bully me into working sick or working unpaid overtime or covering for his hangovers.
I even started putting away a bit of money each check. Just a few bucks at first, but enough to build a rainy day fund, so I'd never feel that same fear of losing my job over standing up for myself. Funny enough, I think Stan could sense that change. The days of him talking down to me were over. He might still be my boss on paper, but we both knew he couldn't push me around anymore. Word about my little doctor's note revenge spread to other stores in our district too. Rick, the union rep, loved telling the story to new hires at orientation. One time, a new cashier named Amber asked me outright during break, "Are you the Ryan who got signed off for 2 weeks because the boss forced you to get a note?" I just grinned. Guilty.
She high-fived me like I was some kind of rebel celebrity. I'll admit, part of me enjoyed the small hero status, not because I did anything outrageous, but because it reminded people they didn't have to put up with garbage treatment. Sometimes just knowing your rights and having the guts to say no is enough to flip the script. About 6 months later, Jessie got promoted to assistant manager. No one deserved it more. She was basically running the front end anyway. Her first week in the new role, she pulled me aside while we were restocking the candy shelf. "Hey," she said, "I want you to know, if I ever have to call you in, it'll be because I really need you, not because I'm being a jerk like Stan." I smirked. Good, because the next time someone demands a doctor's note, I'm getting a note saying I need a spa week in Hawaii. She laughed so hard she knocked over a whole box of Snickers bars. As for Stan, well, word through the grapevine was he was angling for a transfer to another store where no one knew his reputation. But Carla wasn't in a hurry to help him out. He was on probation for the next 12 months, and corporate was watching him like a hawk. Meanwhile, Freshmark quietly rolled out mandatory manager training on labor laws and proper sick leave procedures. They even put up a big poster in the break room listing every employee's rights under state law. Whenever a new hire asked about it, Jessie would point to the poster and then to me and say, "Ask Ryan if you want to hear the story." So yeah, in the end, what started as one miserable light hunched over the toilet turned into the most satisfying revenge I could have hoped for. All because one stubborn manager thought he could bluff me into showing up sick, and a smart doctor decided to teach him a lesson he'd never forget. Months turned into a full year, and by the time my little revenge saga became ancient history to everyone else, it was still my quiet reminder that sometimes standing your ground changes everything, not just for you, but for everyone who comes after you. I'd be lying if I said things were perfect at Freshmart after that. It was still retail. Some days, you'd swear people left their common sense at home just to make your day harder. We'd still get the coupon hoarders who argued over 50 cents, or the teenagers trying to sneak cheap vodka into their backpacks. But what changed, what really stuck, was the atmosphere among us regular workers. People spoke up more. If Stan or any other manager tried to bend the rules, they got called out immediately. The break room whispers turned into confident out loud, "That's not how this works." One of my favorite moments happened about 9 months after the whole fiasco. It was flu season again, big surprise. A cashier named Becca caught the stomach bug and called out for 2 days. Stan, trying to flex his old muscles, told her on speakerphone that if she didn't show up with a doctor's note, she'd be written up. Becca didn't panic. She just said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Cool, I'll give Rick a call then." Stan's face turned redder than a sunburn. He sputtered out, "Never mind, just feel better, Becca." He looked around the break room like he hoped someone would defend him. Nobody did. Jessie leaned over to me and whispered, "He'll never learn, will he?" I shrugged. Probably not. But at least everyone else did.
Outside of work, life was getting better for me too. Those 2 weeks off had been a wake-up call to get my life in order. Not just financially, but in my head. I finally switched my old junker of a car for something that didn't stall at every red light. I signed up for evening classes at the community college, aiming to finish that business degree out of Bannon a few years back. Nights I wasn't studying, I was at Jesse's apartment for game nights, or hanging out with Lewis and his cousins, grilling burgers behind his duplex. It felt good to have a life that didn't revolve entirely around a name tag and a punch clock. For once, I had boundaries, and I protected them. If I was sick, I stayed home, guilt-free. If I was burned out, I spoke up before it got bad, and I encouraged everyone else to do the same. Funny thing is, once you stop letting people walk over you, they start respecting you more, or at least they know better than to try. Even Stan. About 1.5 years after the incident, a memo went around that Stan had voluntarily transferred to another Freshmart across town. Translation, Carla finally got tired of babysitting him and made it clear he could either jump or be pushed. When I heard he was leaving, I didn't throw a party or dance on his metaphorical grave. Truth be told, by then he didn't even register as a threat anymore, just a cautionary tale. On his last day, he tried to do a weird, awkward goodbye speech in the break room, pretending like he was leaving to pursue new opportunities in management consulting. Lewis whispered to me, "Yeah, consulting the back room of a dive bar while he drinks away that final warning." I had to cover my mouth to keep from laughing. After Stan was gone, Jesse, now assistant store manager and the unofficial heart of the front end, made sure his replacement, a soft-spoken guy named Andre from the bakery department, knew exactly how things worked. Andre actually listened to people. He trusted the team. And if you called in sick, he told you to get some rest and drink fluids, not to drag your feverish butt to the doctor's office for a piece of paper. In other words, sanity finally returned to Freshmart. It only took one stubborn idiot and a furious doctor to get there. Sometimes I still think about that miserable night at 2 a.m., hunched over my tiny bathroom sink, shivering and sweating and terrified that missing one shift might ruin everything. I wish I could tell that version of me, "Don't worry, man. You're about to teach that jerk a lesson he'll never forget. And you're going to get 2 weeks off with pay while you're at it." If there's one thing I learned from all this, it's that malicious compliance, the art of obeying an order so literally it backfires spectacularly, is one of the most satisfying kinds of revenge. You don't have to shout, you don't have to break the rules, you just have to follow them so perfectly that the person trying to exploit you ends up tying themselves in knots. And in my case, it gave me a sunny 2-week vacation, a reputation as the guy you don't mess with, and a permanent place in our store's break room folklore.
These days, when new hires ask me what really happened, I just smile and say, let's just say, if a manager ever tells you to get a doctor's note when you're sick, make sure the doctor knows exactly why you're there. And enjoy your paid time off while they deal with the mess they made. Then, I grab my apron, clock in 5 minutes early, just out of habit, and get to work, knowing that my little act of malicious compliance made things better for everyone who comes through those doors. And that, my friend, is worth more than any paycheck Stan ever signed.
If you enjoyed this story, please give it a like, subscribe for more, and share it with someone who'd appreciate it. Thanks for watching.